Making selection using shapes. So we're going to start by looking at the Marquee tools. We have a whole family of Marquee tools: the rectangular Marquee, elliptical Marquee, single row, and single column. So the rectangular Marquee basically allows me to click and drag a box or rectangular selection around the area or content that I want to either move or apply a specific technique to. So if I were to click and drag holding Shift, I'm able to constrain my proportions. Hold Shift and there we go. All right, so now what's selected is what's inside of this container. So that's the rectangular. Think of boxes. Now if we go to the elliptical, we go into ovals or circles. Again, if I hold Shift down, I'm able to create a circular selection. We can click and drag, hold Shift, and actually if I press my space bar, I'm able to relocate that selection. Let up on my space bar, I can keep dragging. Okay. Also, if I go to my peach here, let's make this the active document. Say I want to select this peach, you'll notice that as I drag, it moves down and to the right. A little bit frustrating, and it's maybe a little difficult to see. So I can click, hold Shift if I want it to be a perfect circle, reposition using my space bar, let up on my space bar, keep dragging, my mouse is still held down. If I hold Alt, it actually will drag from the center and it push it off. Okay, so you can see how it's dragging it out. Let's just go to this white background so you can see this a bit better. If I click and drag, holding Shift constrains proportions. Let up on Shift, I'm able to distort this. Hold down on my space bar, I'm able to relocate it. This whole entire time my mouse is still pressed in. If I hold the Alt key, it drags it from the center point. Let's use the space bar. So I have Alt space bar and mouse, let up on my space bar, hold down Shift with my Alt key. Now if I let up on any one of those, I can easily get it back. Let up on my Alt, it pops. Put Alt back down, it's going to drag from the center. Okay, so those are great ways, and you always want to let up on your mouse first before you let up on any of those modifier keys. The single row and single column, and I'm gonna click right in here to deselect. Okay, I can also go under my select menu and I can do deselect, and the quick key is Control D. Let's go to the single row. Single row basically allows me just to do a single click and a row of pixels are selected. Single column, same thing, but in a column. So if I zoom in here, let's go in way far. Basically what I have is 1 pixel worth of a selection, but in a straight up and down column. There's no way to adjust the amount of pixels that are selected. Those are pretty rare. You don't use them very often. Our other tools that are considered marquee, meaning that we get the selected area and it's defined by these dotted lines, which we call marching ants. We have our lasso tool. So the lasso tool is more of a free hand kind of selection. So again, I'm not going to have anything here, but I just want you to see the marquee or the dancing ant. So this is more of an organic, and if I let up, it's going to connect it. Now the reason why it looks like this is because I'm zoomed in 3,200%. Let's do a double click on my hand tool so now it will fit my window, and let's try that again. So if I click and drag here, if I let up right here, it is going to draw a straight line to close my shape. Our selections always have to be closed. So now it's one area that's selected. My polygon, we're going to just go to this. The polygon right underneath allows me to do straight edges. So I click and I let up on my mouse and I'm able to drag to make straight points. So you know, if you're doing something that has straight lines, this works wonderfully. And when I am going to close, you can see that I get a little circle next to my icon, and that indicates it's closed. When it's complete, then I see those marching ants. Control D to deselect. The tool below is the magnetic lasso, and this one you'll see many more options appear at the top. So the magnetic lasso selects an irregular shape by using fastening points. The fastening points have many settings. We're going to come back and talk about feather in a moment. Anti-alias, what this will do is it smooths it. So it will smooth my edge when it's checked. When it's not, it does a ragged edge. I'll show you that too using another tool. The width basically is between 1 and 40, and it sets the distance from the edge to consider for the path. The contrast, again, is an amount that's from 0 or from 1% to 100%, and this is the tool's sensitivity. The higher, then you detect a high contrast and edge rate. Frequency basically is the rate at which fastening points are applied, and fastening points are my little dots that are stuck to the edge. So from 0 to 100, and the higher the more points. So I'm going to zoom in, even though this is not the best quality graphic. Okay. And I want to try to make sure, as for starting out, when you're starting with these tools, make sure that you're not hiding any areas, because that gets to be a bit tricky when you're inside of an active selection and then all of a sudden you run out of your object. You can't find the rest of it. So let's do this magnetic lasso. What I need to do is find an edge. There it is, and you can see the dots are my fastening point. Now with the settings that are defaulted right now, it's doing a pretty good job. If I feel as though I need to attach my own, I can certainly click, and there I apply one. So again, if you start moving too fast with this tool, it might get lost, and there might be some areas where my edge contrast is not so good, and it will lose it. So I'm going to move a little bit faster here where I've got a little bit more of an edge there. It did a little bit of a, didn't get really tight, and that's the problem with this tool. Sometimes it works really great, sometimes not. Now look at, I had some of my picture wasn't showing, so, and I get to my first point, click, and there we go. So there's my dancing ants. It did an okay job. I'm using my space bar to move around. Not so happy with the results there though. Okay. So it's okay for certain. I guess I would suggest for strong contrast edges, the magnetic lasso. There are some other tools that work so much better. I want to go back and talk about what feather and anti-alias are. So I'm going to minimize this and go back to my peach, and I'm going to deselect the current selection. Let's get this a little bit larger so I can zoom in, control spacebar. So in this case, I'm just going to use back to the regular elliptical marquee. Like I said, the feather is an option, and the anti-alias is an option when we have a curved. So they all have feathers. What feather will allow you to do is smooth out the edge. Okay, so feathering smooths it out. So here, if I press delete right now, okay, because it was a background, I'm going to undo that. All right, so now if I press delete, you can see how crisp it is. Now if I increase the feather, let's go pretty extreme. Let's do 20 pixels. Click and drag again. Do you see how it looks like it decreased in size when I let up on my mouse? And when I press delete, there's my feather. Like I said, this is a pretty extreme amount, but you can see how that feather fades out. So that's an option. Now remember that this command is sticky, so the minute I actually leave Photoshop, come back, it will remember that it was at 20, which can be problematic down the road. So when you're done with this feature, it's a good idea to reset it back to 0. All right, I'm going to go back into my history. History panel remembers the last items that I've done, and it lets me step back. So I'm stepping back to where I don't have any selections. Now let's go ahead and do a test between aliased and anti-aliased. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here so you can see what happens. Aliased is checked. Anti-alias, I hold down my shift key to make a perfect circle, press delete, and let's just fill this with my background color, which happens to be white. Do you see around the edges? If I zoom in here, it actually does a little bit of a smoothing. It compensates for those pixels to make it visually feel smooth. That's what anti-alias does when it's checked. When it's not checked, if I do a similar circle, and I'm going to hold Alt and Shift here to drag out from the center to get something fairly similar in size, and press Delete, we'll again fill it with our background color. Deselect, Control D. Look at the difference. So with anti-aliasing not checked or not an option, I get a ragged edge, meaning that the pixels don't compensate. There's no sort of dithering or softening. It's just cut and dry. Pixels there, pixels not there. And we get a rough edge. Now from a distance, it starts to look pretty choppy, and we call that looks pixelated. So you can see how smooth versus the rough edges. That's the anti-aliasing.